Wembley Stadium, London, July 1988. The night air hung heavy with anticipation, charged with the collective energy of 90,000 souls gathered beneath an open sky, scattered with stars that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the beating hearts below. Every seat filled, every standing space claimed by those who had traveled from across the United Kingdom, across Europe, some from as far as Japan and Australia, all drawn by the gravitational force of a performer at the absolute apex of his powers. The Bad World Tour had already broken attendance records across the globe, but tonight felt different, a convergence of perfect conditions that those present would later struggle to explain to those who weren't. The warmth of the summer evening, the particular acoustic magic of the historic venue, the heightened emotions of a British audience witnessing their final night with the artist who had redefined the very concept of performance. As the concert progressed through a masterfully paced set list of hits and spectacle, a palpable current of connection formed between stage and seats, between performer and witnesses, a circuit of energy that seemed to generate its own luminescence in the London night. No one knew yet that this evening would enter music history not for its technical perfection, not for its record-breaking statistics, but for a moment of unplanned humanity that would transcend entertainment to become something approaching communion. Behind a massive stage, in a private moment before the show's final segment, Michael Jackson stood alone in the shadows, gathering himself for what was to come. At 30, he had achieved a level of fame unprecedented in entertainment history. His image and voice recognized in the most remote corners of the world, his every movement studied and emulated by millions. The weight of this reality had become increasingly difficult to bear. The distance between Michael the human being and Michael the global icon widening into a chasm that threatened to consume the person behind the performer. Earlier that day, during his standard pre-show ritual of visiting local children's hospitals and shelters, he had encountered a young boy named Jamie, perhaps 7 years old, whose leukemia diagnosis had left him with just months to live. The child's question, delivered with the unfiltered directness only children can manage, had pierced through layers of celebrity insulation to touch something essential. When you sing about the man in the mirror, do you ever get scared of what you see? In the hours since, the question had echoed in Michael's mind, its simple insight unlocking something he had kept carefully contained through the exhausting demands of the world tour. Now, as the opening synthesizer notes of Man in the Mirror began to fill the massive stadium, Michael moved to his mark at center stage, the familiar music triggering the muscle memory of choreography performed countless times across 5 continents. But something felt different tonight. The barrier between performance and genuine emotion, a protective wall built through years of living under the world's most unforgiving microscope, suddenly seemed paper-thin, permeable. As he began to sing the opening lines about making a change, his voice carried a quality of vulnerability rarely revealed in the controlled perfection of his stadium shows. Those closest to the stage, those who had followed the tour across multiple cities, noticed immediately the subtle shift in his vocal approach, the altered quality of his movement, less presentational and more inwardly focused. Something was happening beyond a rehearsed performance, something authentic breaking through the polished veneer. What Michael couldn't see clearly from the stage, what became apparent only as the song progressed through its first chorus, was the spontaneous movement spreading through the audience like a wave. It had begun with a small group near the front, a few dozen fans who had brought small candles, intending to light them during this particular song as a tribute to its message of reflection and transformation. But the gesture caught and spread with the organic momentum that sometimes emerges in large gatherings, one flame igniting another until sections of the crowd began to glow with pinpoints of light. Security personnel, initially concerned about the fire risk, quickly recognized the controlled, respectful nature of what was unfolding and allowed it to continue. By the time the song reached its bridge, tens of thousands of tiny flames created a rippling ocean of light throughout the massive stadium, visible now to Michael as he navigated the growing emotion in his voice, in his body. The sight struck him with physical force, this sea of light reflecting his words back to him. not as entertainment, but as something approaching spiritual response. Jamie's question from earlier that day resurfaced. Do you ever get scared of what you see? In this moment, what Michael saw before him was his own message manifested, his own words about reflection and change transformed into a physical demonstration of collective understanding. Something broke open inside him, some barrier between performance and raw emotion that he had maintained through years of hypervisibility. His voice caught slightly, a moment of humanity breaking through the superhuman vocal control that had defined his career. Rather than fight it, rather than reassert the professional polish, he allowed the vulnerability to remain, to deepen. As the song built toward its emotional peak, something unprecedented happened. Michael deviated from the carefully choreographed movements that had been performed identically across dozens of cities. Instead, he walked slowly to the very edge of the stage, closer to the audience than the scripted performance allowed, his body language shifting from the stylized precision of his usual delivery to something more organic, more exposed. His voice, always technically brilliant, now carried emotional colors rarely revealed in stadium settings. The raw humanity behind the extraordinary talent exposed without the protective filters of perfectionism. Tears streamed openly down his face, catching the stage lights to create their own small constellation of reflections. This wasn't performance emotion, not the theatrical suggestion of feeling that most concerts deliver. This was genuine, unguarded human vulnerability from an artist who had spent decades constructing an impenetrable public persona precisely to avoid such exposure. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from music history. Moments when the carefully constructed walls between artist and audience briefly dissolved, revealing the profound human connection that lies at the heart of all meaningful art. These glimpses beyond the spectacle remind us why music matters beyond entertainment, how it creates bridges between experiences that might otherwise never touch. The audience's response to this unexpected emotional authenticity was immediate and overwhelming. Many were already moved by the song's message, by the spontaneous candlelight that had transformed the stadium into a reflection of the night sky above. But witnessing Michael Jackson, the most famous, most controlled, most choreographed performer of his generation, in a moment of genuine emotional vulnerability, created a collective experience that transcended ordinary concert dynamics. Throughout the stadium, people began to weep openly, unashamed of their emotional response, understanding that they were witnessing something beyond entertainment, something approaching genuine human communion across the usually impenetrable boundaries of celebrity. The candles continued to multiply as the song built toward its conclusion, until the stadium resembled nothing so much as a galaxy of earthbound stars, each flame a response to the unexpected gift of authentic emotion from an artist most had known only through carefully constructed imagery. What happened next would be recounted differently by everyone who witnessed it, interpretations shaped by individual perspectives and emotional responses. Some would say Michael deliberately orchestrated what followed, others that it emerged organically from the unique alchemy of that particular night. The truth, as captured in the limited audience footage that would later circulate despite the strict no-recording policy, suggested something in between, a moment of genuine inspiration built upon years of performance intuition. As the song reached its final chorus, Michael made another unprecedented deviation from the established show. He gestured to his band to continue playing, extending the song beyond its usual performance length, beyond the carefully timed production schedule that governed every aspect of the massive tour. Then, in a move that violated every security protocol, every established boundary of stadium performance, he stepped down from the stage. Without announcement, without explanation, Michael Jackson moved into the audience itself, accompanied only by a single spotlight that struggled to follow his unplanned journey. Security personnel moved with urgent professionalism to create a protective buffer around him, but their expressions revealed the controlled panic of those responsible for the safety of the world's most recognized human being now moving, unscheduled, into a crowd of 90,000. Michael proceeded with calm determination, moving deeper into the audience than anyone, even those who had worked closely with him for years, had ever seen him venture during a performance. His destination became clear only as he approached a section near the middle of the stadium, an area designated for the Make-A-Wish Foundation and similar organizations that provided experiences for children with life-threatening conditions. There, holding a candle with his mother beside him, sat Jamie, the 7-year-old from the hospital visit earlier that day, the child whose simple question had catalyzed the evening's emotional transformation. Michael knelt before him, the spotlight creating a perfect circle of illumination that enclosed them in a moment of connection that felt simultaneously intensely private and powerfully universal. The 90,000 surrounding them fell into reverent silence, the only sounds the instrumental continuation of Man in the Mirror and the occasional caught breath of emotional response. What words passed between Michael and Jamie in that moment were inaudible to the surrounding crowd, captured by no microphone, recorded by no camera. But their body language told a story more powerful than words could convey. Michael took the boy's free hand in both of his own, spoke briefly with his head inclined close to Jamie's, then embraced him with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the larger-than-life performance persona he had presented throughout the evening. When he released the embrace, he removed something from around his own neck, a simple silver chain with a medallion that caught the light as it moved. This he placed around Jamie's neck, closing the child's fingers around the medallion with a gesture of such natural tenderness that many who witnessed it later described being moved to tears by this alone. But it was what happened next that transformed the moment from moving to transcended. Michael stood, keeping hold of Jamie's hand, and gestured toward the stage, now seemingly miles distant across the sea of candles, where his dancers and band continued the extended instrumental bridge. Jamie's mother helped her son to his feet, and together they began to walk with Michael through the crowd, back toward the stage. Security created a pathway, but what struck witnesses was the quality of Michael's movement. Not rushing, not performing, but walking with the unhurried step of someone accompanying a child, adjusting his natural pace to match the boy's slower progress. As they moved, something extraordinary rippled through the stadium. People began to join hands, linking together in expanding chains of connection that spread outward from the path Michael and Jamie traveled. What had begun as individual candle flames transformed into a web of human connection, physical manifestation of the song's message about reflection leading to unity, to change. By the time they reached the stage, tens of thousands of people stood hand in hand, the spontaneous demonstration of solidarity spreading faster than anyone could track. Security barriers and social divisions temporarily dissolved in this unexpected moment of collective witness. Michael lifted Jamie carefully onto the stage, then followed, keeping hold of the boy's hand as he guided him to center stage. The band, professional to their core despite the completely unscripted nature of what was unfolding, responded to Michael's subtle gestures, bringing the extended instrumental back to the song's final chorus. What happened in those final moments of the song? Michael kneeling again to Jamie's height, singing the closing lines not to the stadium at large, but directly to this one child, their foreheads nearly touching as the music reached its emotional peak, created something beyond performance, beyond entertainment, beyond even the typical connection between artist and audience. It was, those who witnessed it would later agree, a moment of pure humanity breaking through the elaborate machinery of stadium spectacle, of genuine emotion penetrating the protective barriers that usually separate the famous from their audiences. As the final notes sounded and Michael embraced Jamie once more before guiding him gently back to the wings where his mother waited, the stadium erupted in a response that transcended typical applause. This was sound as emotional release, as collective recognition of having witnessed something authentic in a context often defined by artifice, something intimate in a space designed for mass experience. The remainder of the concert carried a different energy, the connection between performer and audience fundamentally altered by their shared experience of vulnerability, of authenticity. When Michael performed the final encore, his traditional closing of Man in the Mirror replaced by Heal the World, in spontaneous acknowledgement of the evening's emotional journey. The audience responded not as spectators, but as participants in something that had transcended entertainment to become genuine communion. The candles remained lit throughout the stadium, transforming the typical concert conclusion into something approaching ritual, shared ceremony of human connection across the barriers that usually separate us from each other, from our own emotional truths, from the possibility of genuine change inspired by reflection. What no one in the audience knew, what wouldn't become public knowledge until years later through a documentary about the tour, was that Michael had arranged for Jamie and his family to receive ongoing medical support for experimental treatments not covered by National Health Service provisions, for modifications to their home to improve Jamie's quality of life during his remaining time. These arrangements have been made through anonymous channels, with strict instructions that the source of the assistance never be revealed. For Michael, the public moment on stage had been genuine expression, not calculated publicity. The private follow-through, invisible to all but a handful of necessary facilitators, reflected his understanding that true compassion extends beyond symbolic gestures into practical action. Jamie lived for 11 months beyond his doctor's most optimistic projections, long enough to see his 8th birthday, to witness the fall of the Berlin Wall, to experience one more Christmas with his family. When he finally passed in June of 1989, he was wearing the medallion Michael had given him that night at Wembley, a simple silver disc engraved with the message, "Make that change on one side, and it begins with you on the other." At his funeral, attended by his family and close community, a letter was read, its source unspecified, but its author unmistakable to those who had witnessed the Wembley concert. "You asked if I ever get scared of what I see in the mirror," it read. "The truth is yes, every day. But you taught me that being scared doesn't matter if you still find the courage to look honestly, to see clearly, to begin the change. You looked into your own mirror with more courage than most will ever know. Thank you for seeing me, not the performer, but the person. Thank you for the gift of your question, your candle, your truth." In the decades that followed, the Wembley candlelight moment, as it became known among fans, took on an almost mythical quality, its significance growing rather than diminishing with time. Those who had been present spoke of it with the particular authority of, "I was there, I saw it happen." Bootleg recordings of variable quality circulated among collectors, their imperfections somehow adding to rather than detracting from the power of what they documented. The sound quality might be poor, the visual elements barely discernible, but the emotional impact remained palpable even through these distorted windows into the experience. Music journalists who had witnessed it firsthand wrote retrospectives on significant anniversaries, each attempting to capture in words what had been essentially nonverbal, a moment whose power lay precisely in its transcendence of the analytical, the explicable. For Michael himself, that night at Wembley became a touchstone, a reference point for what was possible when the walls between public persona and private humanity temporarily dissolved. Those close to him noted subtle but significant changes in his approach to performance afterward, not abandoning the meticulous perfectionism that had defined his career, but finding more moments within that framework for genuine connection, for emotional authenticity that hadn't been scripted or rehearsed. The candle gesture spread to subsequent tours, fans in cities around the world bringing lights to his performances of Man in the Mirror, creating visual echo of that London night. Michael acknowledged these tributes with evident emotion, though never attempted to recreate the specific circumstances that had made the original moments so powerful. Understanding, perhaps, that such genuine convergences of timing, emotion, and spontaneous human connection cannot be manufactured, only recognized and honored when they emerge. Years later, long after Michael had left this world, that night at Wembley would still be discussed, analyzed, celebrated. Music historians would place it in context. Fans would share increasingly detailed memories. New generations would discover the limited footage online and marvel at the emotional authenticity captured there. But perhaps the most telling testament came from a security team member who had been working that night, who had witnessed the unplanned journey into the audience from a perspective of professional concern rather than fan appreciation. Interviewed for a documentary in his 60s, decades after the event, he leaned forward in his chair, eyes bright with remembered wonder. "I've worked security for everyone from the Stones to Springsteen to Madonna," he said. "Seen it all, managed every kind of crowd situation you can imagine. But I've never seen anything like what happened that night. It wasn't just that he broke protocol, went into the crowd. It was the quality of attention he brought to that moment, complete, undivided, as if the stadium with 90,000 people had fallen away and there were just two humans connecting through something bigger than both of them. In this business, in the celebrity world especially, that kind of authentic presence is the rarest thing of all." He paused, emotion briefly overtaking him. "We spend so much time protecting famous people from their audiences, creating distance, maintaining barriers. That night, I understood why those barriers exist, but also what's lost because of them. For a few minutes, Michael Jackson wasn't a superstar being protected from his fans. He was a human being connecting with another human being about the things that really matter, and 90,000 people got to witness that connection. I'm not a particularly sentimental bloke, but I'll tell you this. I've never seen anything more beautiful in my life. Perhaps that's the most accurate description of what happened that night at Wembley Stadium in July 1988. Not a calculated performance moment, not a planned emotional peak, but something more rare and valuable. A genuine human connection that momentarily transcended the elaborate machinery of fame to reveal the shared humanity that exists beneath all our constructed identities. A reminder that even in context designed for spectacle, for distance between performer and audience, for carefully managed presentation rather than vulnerable truth, moments of authentic connection can emerge, unexpected and transformative. That sometimes, when we least expect it, the barriers between us fall away to reveal what we share rather than what separates us. Our capacity for empathy, for reflection, for beginning the change that ripples outward from individual choice to collective possibility. If this video has touched you, if it has reminded you of music's power to bridge divides and create unexpected moments of human connection, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who understands that beneath the spectacle of entertainment lies art's true purpose, to create spaces where we recognize ourselves and each other, where we remember our shared humanity beyond the roles and divisions that so often define us. And remember that in a world increasingly mediated through screens and images, through carefully curated presentations of self, the courage to be genuinely present with another human being may be our most revolutionary act, our most precious gift to each other and to ourselves. In a small memory garden created near Jamie's childhood home, a simple bench bears a plaque with words taken not from Michael Jackson's famous lyrics, but from the private letter read at the boy's funeral. "Thank you for seeing me." Not the performer, but the person. On summer evenings, local children sometimes gather there with small candles, recreating in miniature the constellation of lights that had filled Wembley Stadium decades earlier. Most don't know the full story, the specific connection between their community and one of music's most iconic figures. But they carry forward the essential truth of that night. That light shared between us grows rather than diminishes, that individual reflection can spark collective transformation, that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen not across stages and security barriers, but in the unguarded moments when we allow ourselves to be fully human in the presence of another's humanity. The candles flicker, shadows dance, and something of that London night lives on, not as celebrity history, but as human possibility, as a reminder of what can happen when we find the courage to see and be seen beyond the personas we create, the roles we play, the mirrors that both reflect and distort our shared journey through this brief, beautiful experience of being alive together.